This is the eLearn podcast. If you're passionate about the future of learning, you're in the right place. The expert guests on this show provide insights into the latest strategies, practices, and technologies for creating killer online learning outcomes. My name's Ladek, and I'm your host from Open LMS. The eLearn podcast is sponsored by eLearn Magazine, your go-to resource for all things online learning. Click-by-click how-to articles, the latest in EdTech, a spotlight on successful outcomes and trends in the marketplace. Subscribe today and never miss a post at elearnmagazine.com. And Open LMS, a company leveraging open source software to deliver a highly effective, customized, and engaging learning experience for schools, universities, companies, and governments around the world since 2005. Learn more at openlms.net. Hello, everyone. My name is Ladek, and my guest for today is Dean Saunders, the Vice President for Product Development here at Open LMS. In this total cost of ownership conversation, Dean and I talk about Dean's current focus in the company, which is corporate education, and whether or not we do ourselves a disservice by dividing education into the sectors of traditional schools and workforce development. Then Dean kind of puts a little surprise on the table, which honestly I wasn't even expecting, about some breaking and exciting news about how Open LMS is helping people who are displaced by the war in Ukraine by offering our learning platform and technical support for free. And you can hear more details about this with a podcast that happened a few weeks ago, earlier in the series, with Michael Phillips. He is from Monash University, and he gives really specific details about how we're partnering with Monash, how we connect with people in Ukraine, and whatnot. It's a fascinating story, and I recommend you check it out. Dean and I then move our conversation to the total cost of ownership of learning of a learning management system and what you need to consider in both the education and corporate sectors when selecting a system and provider. Things like workforce planning, content development strategy, lifelong learning, and how, the career sector is changing and more. We then dive a bit deeper into how a school or company can practically go about measuring return on investment for their learning platform and strategy. And Dean gives some really exciting or practical examples about different ways to measure that ROI depending on what your outcomes are for your learning strategy. We then talk about what is happening in the corporate sector that's exciting for the near term, both from a regulatory standpoint and a technology innovation standpoint. We even talk about how NFTs can be leveraged in education. And then we kind of wrap up our conversation around what some of the surprising limps or gaps that have come to light post-pandemic in learning from the corporate sector perspective. And a little hint here, Dean talks about how the focus on personal lifelong learning and growth is completely changing what a career means and what you need to be able to provide from a corporate standpoint in order to keep people interested, to keep people growing, and to keep them engaged in your company. And remember, we record this podcast live so that we can interact with you, our listeners, in real time. So if you'd like to join the fun every week on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, just come over to elearnmagazine.com and subscribe. Now, I give you Dean Saunders.
Dean, you and I both work for this wonderful Open LMS company. Why don't we start off? Just give us the 30 seconds about who you are. And, you have already evolved in this company a couple of times into the role that you're overseeing and whatnot. So what is it that you're paying attention to right now? What should we call you?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, Stephen, we work for education. That's what we first do. Yeah, we work for education. Open LMS gives us a paycheck, which we appreciate greatly. We certainly work for education. And these days I'm looking after corporate education across the Open LMS group. So I'm out there, I'm talking to organizations about the direction that they want to go in, what they're not getting out of their current strategic approach to the way they address education. I'm talking about their content approach as well too. So things like, open source content versus micro-credentialing and the like too. So, the stuff that we just want to learn now. We don't want a badge for it. Like if I want to make a cake, I don't want a cake badge. But if I do a course on introduction to Excel, I might want an Excel badge.
Sure. Absolutely. Before, I know that there's a couple of pieces that we wanted to touch on here, but as you were started describing that, the first thing that is, do we do ourselves a disservice by dividing the education market up? into K-12 secondary, K-12 higher education, corporate learning. Does it do, as an adult, as I move out of higher ed and I go into, the rest of my life, what about education changes? What's different? What are the things that I need to change, and what are the things that I'm expecting from my company these days in terms of education?
I think the two basic fundamentals to look at there, Ladek, are one I have to pay for, the other one I get paid for.
Okay, that's 100%. No, like I love how you go right to the paycheck every time. That's great.
Well, yeah. Well, when you think about it, when you're a student, let's say you're at university. I'll use university as the example because that's where I spend a bit of my time. I'm paying maybe $20,000 a year to a reputable institution to be educated. So I'm saying I'm going to forget the paycheck. I'm not going to go straight into the workforce. I'm going to invest in myself with this organization. And I'm depending on this organization to get me ready for a workforce, to give me a successful job, or to give me the skills and grounding I need to get to the level I want to be, and learn those basic fundamentals and about project management or whatever sort of field or discipline you hope to go into. When you're in the workforce, though, you're being effectively paid to learn. So you go to work as a part of your working career, your job. Education, on-the-job education becomes specific to that, and generally specific to the role as well too. So it'll generally be some sort of targeted education. You forget the compliance stuff, but it'll be education directly related to your discipline. So they're I think to some extent they're going to be at least in the shorter term fairly separate things, or more they're close together. They morph into one another. So I pay to learn, and then I get paid to learn.
I love it. The reason why I think it probably sticks in my brain is we've had a couple of people on the show who live in that gap, or that transaction, that conjunction where higher education and the corporate world meet. Like, what are the needs of the corporate world? What is higher ed delivering, and how do we make those bonds stronger, or how do we make those connections stronger? And so I find it interesting, just to beat this to death. I saw a post on LinkedIn the other day. Somebody was asking what would be, it sounds like a fairly fundamental question, or a very basic question of what's the difference between upskilling and reskilling, right? But again, it goes back to your point of when you're in the workforce, that education component, you can't show up and be done anymore.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, I'm speaking to a lot of hospitality organisations, funny enough, at the moment, and probably not funny enough, but funny to the extent that they've got the biggest job shortage at the moment, so they can't find people with the necessary skills. And excuse me, look at bartending, for example. Well, you need a responsible service of alcohol certificate to serve drinks, or you need to be of a certain age and have a qualification, if you like, to be able to do that. Same with serving food. You need a certificate in food hygiene. So it's not like you can just open the doors and say, hey, we've got jobs here, learn as you go. You need that certificate before you go. But I think, I'm touching on COVID, and we sort of have to do that because it's still there, But a lot of people left the industry due to COVID, just due to restaurants shutting down and food processing factories and the like shutting down. So that created a skill shortage, and that also tied into people's lifestyles, because traditionally hospitality is like something that's done after hours, maybe 6 p.m. till say midnight. And then people sort of got used to the fact that those who working in hospitality might have had friends who weren't, saying, oh, well, I can actually catch up with you now from 6 p.m. till 10 p.m., whereas I couldn't before. So they're going, well, what other things can I do? How do I reskill, for example, to be able to reach out to other jobs and the like too? So, things have definitely changed, and people have had to sort of, change their approach to how they live and learn at the same time.
Fantastic. I want to give you the stage for a little while here. I'm going to shift gears on you, because you, in the green room before we started this, kind of threw on the table, you had some interesting breaking news, which quite honestly, this is not a setup. I have no idea what you're about to put on the table here, but what's the breaking news? What's the good stuff?
I do. Look, it's some really, really exciting news. And one of the things about working in education as a whole is you're always giving back. Whether you realize it or not, whether you're a back-end developer, whether you're a content creator, whether you're an instructional designer, whether you're a general manager, no matter what it is. We have a social responsibility, I think, to use that superpower, if you like, to use that superpower appropriately. We're fortunate enough at Open LMS to be able to, have some cadence around how we help others in the community. And I had a call the other day from a previous staff member, actually, who reached out just out of the blue and said, "Hey, I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse. I don't know if you're in a position to help, but we are." This is a group of volunteers, from Monash University, who are a group of teachers and professors and the like, about 300 of them in total, so 300 volunteers who are spending their time with a whole heap of displaced, so 6,000 displaced students in the Ukraine. These are students affected by, obviously, the war, lost their homes perhaps, or lost their schools perhaps, and don't have regular ongoing teaching. So up until today, they've been utilizing Zoom links on an Excel spreadsheet and logging into those. They've been affected by Zoom bombers and the like, dropping in on these sessions, so it hasn't been ideal. And they came with us just with a pledge and said, "Please help us, and can you do that?" So I had a call very soon after that one with Phil Miller, obviously the managing director of Open LMS, to say, "We've got to do something here. I mean, if this isn't in our wheelhouse to be able to help out, what are we in the business for?" Right. And Phil's obviously immediate and violent agreement that had to happen. So, there's, when you see these types of causes, there's different ways to help. Obviously, you can donate money, but the biggest thing I hate about donating money is you never really see what the actual impact of the money is. So, you think back to Elon Musk, with Starlink, who immediately came to the aid of Ukraine and said, "You got no internet? No problem. We'll change the orbit of some of our satellites and we'll help you out in that way." And it's exactly the same with us. We were immediately able to move the needle and say, "Yes, we can help you. We can deploy a platform for you, which will allow these 6,000 displaced students to be able to access education from all of these volunteers in not just Australia, but also overseas as well too." So from Open LMS, we've already had hands go up as well to say, after hours, I'd love to offer some of my support. Is it technical support? Is it pedagogical support? I'll do what I can too. So, it's a really good unifying thing, I think, for us as an organization, but also part of that corporate social governance as well too, of being a responsible organization who responds to these types of things. So this actually came out of an all hands meeting where we revealed this to staff, and the response is great. As I said to them, as you go into your weekend, how great is it to share a story that I went to work today? What we did? Our software, the software that I work on every day, is being used to help out displaced kids, making sure they get access to education.
Do we have any potential connections? We have a fairly large client base, like in terms of content, in terms of reaching out to them and saying, "Hey, could we grow the pie even more in that way, or is that too far out of scope?"
I love that unconstrained thinking, and with these types of things, that's exactly what we need. So we need to be talking again to our customers, even people who aren't our customers, who want to be a part of this and to sort of help out in the cause. I mean, these are good things, and if those kids, we don't know how long this war is going to go for. We also don't know what the ramifying and long-term effects of the war are either. So we don't know how long it's going to take to rebuild that school, or how long it's going to take, little Johnny or little Jane to get back home and get back to some sort of normality. So the more normal we can give them at this stage, absolutely the better. So I guess using you as a medium, Stephen, what can we do across our customer base and people who aren't our customers? Just citizens of humanity can help at the end of the day. So
I think that we start ringing the bell. That's what we start doing. So that's absolutely fantastic. I'd love let's you and I stick a pin in that for our conversation right now. But I'm sure I'll learn about this in short order. But just to find that instance of open edu that's out there, and to be able to point people to it and say, hey, look, how can you help? That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So the platform's in the final stages of deploying now. So we're taking the Monash volunteer wing through a normal onboarding process. So they have obviously a robust way to deploy the system. Our onboarding team are engaged to help that get up and running as fast as possible. So yeah, great thing to be a part of. Very proud Open LMS standpoint.
Well, it actually segues nicely into the next question that I had for you, or what I was going to talk to you about today was the total cost of ownership of a system like this, right? Like, it's going to cost us money as a company to, create an instance and, help with the training and provide support, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also costs that, a typical university or a company bears when they are thinking about a learning management system.
Yeah.
I know that you've thought a lot about this, and I would be interested to hear you juxtapose, what those different considerations are in terms of the corporate world versus the higher education world, and just what you consider, and what do you even consider when you're thinking about TCO?
Yeah, look, so I recently released an article on just this on our Open LMS website, which sort of breaks it down. But again, we're sort of getting back to the newer normal now, and people are sort of taking this, very responsive, very aggressive response to getting something out there. They're coming back more to, the LMS becoming that critical business tool for development of staff, for retention of staff, and the like. And a lot of this falls down to those extraneous things that, it's not just a platform you deploy and off you go, job done. It's like, when we talk about education, there is no done. When we talk about products, there is no done. Products need to evolve to be able to stick around. Otherwise, they end up in this boneyard that's way over there with lots and lots of other dead products that maybe shouldn't have been there in the first instance. The whole point of launching any product, and a learning product is no exception, is a good product is designed to make an undesirable task easier.
Mm.
Yeah, so learning falls into that category. So not all of us love to learn. We want you to love the way you learn, and we put a lot of effort into making sure that's the case. But in a lot of cases, it can be declared an undesirable task. So how do we make that better?
And just like, not even undesirable, but it's just like, where do I fit it in? Well, I don't have the time. Like, my wife and I talk about this all the time, where it's just like, you get just the things that you have to do for your job or for your family or whatever. At what point do you fit this in? That's a huge consideration.
Yeah, exactly. And we see a lot of organizations not taking the time to actually factor in, the workforce planning side of launching an LMS. So as I said before, you can't just launch it and say, off you go. I mean, you've got to think about things like, how are you going to market the LMS? So how are people going to be informed about, what it is, what the immediate benefits are to them, what the future plans are for the product? Users should be aware of new things that are coming, and how that will help them in their own lives. There needs to be workforce planning taken into account as well too. So workforce planning is an organizational cost. So if we're deploying learning to a call center, for example, well, at any one time while the course is rolling out, 10% of our workforce is going to be off the phones and not answering calls. So what does that mean to, let's face it, the dollars and cents at the end of the quarter? Is that going to have an impact on the performance of the organization? Obviously, the content strategy, the cost of actually developing content. Am I going to be able to do that in-house? What's the physical cost of actually producing that content? We see a lot of organizations that might use a subject matter expert, for example, to produce that content. Well, what's the true cost of that? Because that subject matter expert also has a day job as well too. So is that going to push out other projects by them not completing those projects on time? What's the impact of that? So is outsourcing a more viable and cheaper option to get the thing done, where you have a fixed cost and a fixed rate of time? So they're things you need to take into consideration. And obviously employee value. So how do you get feedback mechanisms to make sure that what you've implemented inside your organization is showing some form of return? And some form of return, in the case of learning, isn't an immediate return on money. Sometimes it's a longer investment than that. But one way you might measure an ROI on good e-learning is perhaps if you're rolling out sales training. So you're rolling out a sales curriculum, but what's the business outcome from that? So we know what the learning outcome is. By the end of this course, you'll be able to do X. Or by the end of this curriculum, you'll be able to do Y. But what does that mean? So to the CEO, I've got to go to him and say, right, if we put our staff through this training, it's going to be a 6-month curriculum with regular checks, regular mentoring, regular coaching. And by the end of this, I reckon we can have a 5% increase on our bottom line.
That's what you kind of just stole my thunder, because I was just going to ask, how do we have TCO relate to ROI, right? Because ultimately you're investing in these systems, in these processes, and making decisions to raise the bottom line, right? To make people more productive, to make systems more efficient, and then ultimately have a higher return for the company. So is that equation always unique for every organization? They kind of have to figure it out their own and kind of make the most sense of it on their own, or is there a process that we can follow?
Yeah, look, I think there is a process we can follow. I mean, I've got some documentation around this. I should actually probably share, and probably will in coming weeks as well. Perhaps we can figure out on the.
Maybe I just gave you some work for a new article.
Yeah, you probably did. Yeah, I hate meeting with you. Yeah. Yeah, look, there is, and I mean, it's going to be different depending on the type of organisation you are. Like some organisations are going to want to reduce accidents, for example. So if you're in manufacturing and you're having 5 accidents a month, well, obviously 5 accidents a month's fairly high. So what's wrong? What don't these people know that's causing them to have accidents in the workplace? So the ROI is different to increasing sales by 5%. So that they are slightly different playbooks, but they do vehemently express the importance of considering these things before you actually implement or go shopping for an LMS. Is an LMS even the right fit? Is it the right product to solve your problem? There's no doubt about it. Education, and it's not just platforms. Obviously, it's the content that sits on that platform as well too. Education makes you a more competent organisation, and competent organisations lead to more confident organisations who are able to make bigger and better informed decisions, and obviously that leads to overall productivity and indeed retention. If you're happy going to work and you're always learning something new, so you can't know everything, but if you're feeling more confident in what you do to be able to perform your role, the more likely you are to stick around and want to develop and impress those impressions on others and the like as well too. So it does have an overarching business effect, education, versus just a band-aid solution for a particular problem.
So take me next to you mentioned him earlier, Phil Miller, the executive director at Open LMS. He's kind of famous for saying, an LMS never taught anybody anything, right? Like this is the platform, this is the system that we use in order to deliver education. What are as you're focusing more now on the corporate world, what are those needs and pieces that corporations need in order to deliver education? So how are they developing content? What are some unique solutions that you're seeing out there in terms of that? How are they delivering instruction? Are they using sort of forward-looking technologies like AI and machine learning? What are you seeing out there right now in the corporate sphere that is either surprising, accelerating, or what?
Yeah, so there's probably two sides to this coin. So there's the infrastructure, privacy, legislative, technology side, and then there's the good stuff.
There's all the non-sucky stuff.
Exactly right. So look, obviously over there we do need to have these things, and I don't want to downplay them because they are very, very important. But we need to have high-performing systems on high-performing architecture. We need to have products that are supported by highly competent, efficient people and processes. This is all the stuff that you don't see, and it probably comes back into that total cost of ownership too. Is you want that to be someone else's problem. You don't want to be worrying about penetration testing and privacy and performance and upgrades and all that sort of stuff. You just go away that bit. What I want to see is the immediate impact on my people. So out there at the moment, we're seeing definitely a gravitas towards people wanting, obviously, the infrastructure and the side bit. That's a good bit. So that's a checkbox. And they'll generally give us big, long lists to say, the system must do all of these things. And we do, for the most part, most of those things. But on the student side, students themselves are obviously giving more of a voice these days as well, too. So students and learners. So generally, I'll speak to K-12, I call students. Workforce, I call learners. So I'm going to say learners. Let me change a gear there. So learners, want recognition for the things that they do. Now, when we talk about, and I spoke about open source, and when I talk about open source learning, what I'm talking about is things like, TikTok and YouTube and Facebook, places where it's, that sort of Web 4, user-generated content. So, as I said before, I don't want a badge to be able to make a pie, but I want to know how to make the pie. I want to save it to my favorites and done. But in the workforce, anything that they do, we're seeing a stronger demand for recognition of that skill. As people put together, we talk about the skills economy and the like, that's their currency, if you like. So we talk about skills in the blockchain, for example, and being able to have that skills portability from one role to another, which means something to your next employee or to that next job you're going for. People want ownership of those skills, and they want to be able to gather those skills as much as they can. On the CVs, the 90s, you could pretty much write whatever you want. But when you talk of NFTs and having ownership over digital assets, it's almost the same in the learning sphere. So you have digital ownership over your skills. So it's something that can be recognized and makes you more attractive for either promotional roles or roles external to your organization. So that's certainly a big one we're seeing.
Mm. What, you just put all these different things on the table. I did not expect to be talking about NFTs today. That's another new one. How are corporations leveraging it? Like, I got to ask you, how are they leveraging NFTs right now in order to advance education?
Yeah, well, look, at this stage, most organizations are just talking about it. Is it our next big thing? Certainly micro-credentialing is now the norm, if you like. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of organizations that do it. We certainly partner with organizations that you can do it. There's a lot of open source organizations that obviously allow you to build your own credentials inside your organization as well, too. So credentials which have a rubber stamp, so you can move from, especially in larger organizations, from one role to another and have that verified that you've done things specific to your organization. But yeah, look, the NFT space is certainly a new space, but certainly the universities will be making much more. Talking in university space again, which I'm not allowed to do, but we'll be making more use of those transportable skills moving forward as well too. Yeah, it's a great conversation. It's probably another half an hour we can spend on it.
Yeah, I find it fascinating because I love the shakeout, especially with the recent, kick in the pants that all crypto has taken over the last, 6 months here, and kind of really hasn't recovered at this stage yet, but it's here to stay. I mean, right now we're probably using some form of blockchain or some form of Web 3.0 in order, just the technology that's underneath this broadcast here somewhere. So, but I'm really fascinated to see how that continues to play out. But the question I really want to ask you is, as you have been focusing on the corporate space right now for a while, what are the interesting, what are the surprise limps that you're seeing in the shift to, the all remote work universe, or the demand to be the remote work universe, and corporations' ability to, serve that and continue to do that, but while still calling people back in? Or, are there just some unusual challenges in the education aspect of lifelong learning that you've been sort of surprised with?
Yeah, I think, people are more focused these days on self-improvement than ever before. I mean, in the past, I think we may have done a lot of what was necessary rather than necessary to sustain ourselves in our current roles and those sorts of things, versus the new economy, which is again, the digital skills economy. So I can pivot, I can reskill, or I can upskill. So people are a lot more focused on that in the remote work environment. And I think, a part of that is driven by the way we use our time as well too. I mean, in a traditional setting, you'd arrive at work, you'd get out your to-do list and carry forward those items you didn't do yesterday and add the new items to the list and all the rest. I think, that list has changed somewhat, and it is, educational or personal development are sneaking more and more onto that list as well too. So that creates a bit of a shift in the way we traditionally learn. And a lot of that learning is obviously happening online because, again, when we were in the workforce, we might have enrolled ourselves in a face-to-face session somewhere at a university or at a corporate training facility. Now, more and more of what we're doing, because we're doing it from home, is obviously going to be online. So therefore, we're confronted with a sea of providers now that we didn't know even existed.
Sure,
before. We really weren't looking for them. I think personal and professional development are really becoming more part of every day versus, that thing I just have to do to satisfy my boss or satisfy the needs of the organization or, have a chance at getting the new role.
Does that mean that businesses and companies now, it has to be a part of the package that when we're choosing the content that is available to employees, it's not only what serves the business, but then also serves the employees. And we're making the assumption, maybe again, there's the equation that we're already doing, that TCO of all of that content and the support and whatnot is going to ultimately serve the bottom line of the business as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, let's face it, we all work for money.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Sorry, I'd love to say that. Otherwise, we'd all be volunteers and we'd grow our own food. I don't know. But, I think when you look at packaging as an employee now, when you do apply for a role, you do consider education. How are you going to make me better? So I'm coming to you with a certain set of skills. Those are a certain set of skills that you need because you're interviewing 3 people. You chose me over the other 2. So you obviously want what I have to offer. But I also need something from you in return. And it's not just money. It's going to be money, it's going to be time, and it's going to be some form of professional development. Because I need to know in 12 months' time or 18 months' time or 2 years' time that there's somewhere else for me to be. Because I don't want to be doing the same thing forever and ever and ever. I want to be able to progress, at least in some part. That I think makes up an important part of the overall, let's call it the remuneration package or the retention package or the attrition package, or maybe we eventually call it the growth package. But the package is worth more than just, your base salary and benefits.
I love this conversation because I'm just thinking about the ephemeral. I love thinking about just the ephemeral nature of everything these days, right? And that is now we finally have arrived at this place where that is the career is ephemeral now, right? I mean, as you just said, look, 18. I love the time frame that you even use, like a year, 18 months. I'm like, wow, like most people are just getting. I used to think most people are just getting started in their position, sort of a year in. You kind of own it and you can really kind of run with it. But that's when they're already starting to say, wait, like what's the next? What's the next thing, right?
Well, the roles have evolved so much as well. It's if you were a help desk manager and you're really concentrating on the skills that a help desk manager does have, there's so many transversal skills in a role like that. So if you're a help desk manager, there's probably out of the 20 skills that an account manager might need, you might have 12 of them in your existing skill set. So you only need to fill in certain knowledge gaps to be able to make that move. And so long as it depends what drives your move as well too. Sometimes it's just change. Sometimes it's a sideways step versus an up step as well too. You just want to do something different, but you don't want to leave the organization. You've formed relationships there. You've worked with colleagues there. In a personal capacity or whichever. You're tied to the values of the organization and the success of the organization. So you don't want to leave. You just want to do something different. So it allows you to do that. Skills development.
Fantastic. Final question for you, Dean. What are you tapped into? What are you excited about for, as you look, 2023 is going to be here before we snap our fingers. Like, Is there anything that you're looking forward to next year that is coming down the pipe?
Look, I'm definitely looking forward to all the changes that we have with, or the evolving changes really we have with Open LMS work. I have to give that a little plug because
100%.
Work flex. So yeah, certainly looking forward to that. I mean, obviously, certainly looking forward to the changes we have across our EDU. I mean, our whole business really, even when we take into account content and the like too. It's great to be talking to customers, to potential customers, to people just in the industry, about what we're all doing, and it's great to sort of see some of that mesh out there as well, to sort of see all this stuff gel together. And I hate problem replication when you got too many people working on the same problem, and quite often coming to the same solution. So if we can work together on solving those problems, everybody wins, I think. So I'm looking forward to doing more collaborative stuff over the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Fantastic, Dean Saunders. It is always a pleasure to speak with you, sir. I wish you a wonderful morning, and I guess it's Friday for you. So have a great end of your week, and we'll talk soon.
I will. Thanks for having me on again.
Thanks again for joining me for the eLearn podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. Just push subscribe on your player right now. And remember, you can join the conversation live on YouTube, Facebook, and my LinkedIn feed every week. I hope to see you there. Thanks.